Welcome back to This Week in Formula One. This week is the week of the 23rd of February 2026, and we have just finished the Bahrain testing, so this is the official week before the start of the 2026 Formula One season. I want to put a disclaimer at the beginning of the video. In future weeks, This Week in Formula One is going to be changing a little bit. For each subsequent race week that a race is going on, This Week in Formula One is basically going to turn into a race pre-show. So it's going to be This Week in Formula One, plus whatever race I'm talking about. I'm not sure what I'll call it just yet, but we shall see. So next week it'll be a special Melbourne 2026 Grand Prix edition of the show. I will also be attending the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, Victoria, so yeah, I'm going to be vlogging it a little bit, so I'll do a video of my experience with the Australian Grand Prix most likely in the preceding week or later in the week. I'm also aware that I haven't done yet my Bahrain testing week to explain. That is coming later in the week, don't worry. I won't be covering any of that in this week's video. I'll be covering it purely in later in the week's video, possibly on Friday-ish, so stay tuned for that. But without further ado, no more of my yapping. Let's get into This Week in Formula One. So let's get into our first story for this week. Again, I want to reiterate that I won't be covering anything to do with the Bahrain testing in this video. This is simply all the relevant news that happened over the last kind of week or so outside of that. And because of that, there's not a lot to talk about, but I'll be covering as much as I possibly can, and I'll be doing a full video on week 2 of the Bahrain testing later in the week, so stay tuned for that. But here we have our first story, which is Cadillac providing update on when their in-house Formula One engine, will make its debut. So if you're not aware, Cadillac is in the process of developing their own entirely new power unit. And as of right now, I think they're using a Ferrari power unit, if I'm not mistaken. And when they first signed in to become part of Formula One, I think part of the deal was that they had to make their own power unit. So this is a continuation of that, and the team boss Dan Taurus has shared an update on that. If I'm not mistaken, it was set to be in 2029, but I guess we shall see. Yeah, here we are. Their original target of 2029, but they're trying to speed up the process, so possibly we could see it sooner rather than later, which is not entirely surprising, and it seems like they're making good progress on it. But again, yeah, it says it's possible that the regulations could change before 2031, and it's possible that they don't change before 2031. So I think it's kind of a matter of it just being a fluctuating process. Whether or not we see it before then, who knows? But right now it seems their focus is still 2029, which is not entirely surprising. They're also working on a United States headquarters in Fishers, Indiana, which will run alongside their European facility, which is not surprising considering they're a majorly American-focused organization. They would want a headquarters in America, because that makes sense to me, even though a large amount of the Formula One teams have their headquarters in the UK. But yeah, apparently they're hoping to wrap up construction in the first quarter of 2027, and they're very excited. So yeah, I am excited to see what Cadillac has for their first major power unit. It's definitely very exciting to see how they will go. Certainly, I think this year is a little bit of a write-off, unfortunately, where it's just very difficult to tell how they're going to go, if they go well at all. But I hope Cadillac has a good year, and they've got two very good, very experienced drivers. So I think, if anything, there'll be a wealth of knowledge that they gain from this season. And I wish Cadillac nothing but the best. So let's get into our next story. Let's discuss Sir Lewis Hamilton. Lewis was somewhat down towards the end of the 2027 season, and he seemed to be quite negative about a lot of different things, but he's made some comments over the past couple of days and some posts on Twitter that would suggest that he's feeling otherwise. Lewis is on his 20th Formula One season, so as it got toward the end of last year and he seemed very down and very negative about anything, it was very sad to me that he seemed to be in quite a bad place mentally after everything that had happened to him. He also lost his dog towards the end of the year, which is extremely sad. R.I.P. Roscoe. So it just seemed there was compounding factor on top of compounding factor on top of compounding factor that led to Lewis being quite negative, which was a shame, because He's an extremely gifted driver, and he's the greatest Formula One driver of all time from a statistical perspective. So it was a shame to see Lewis doubt himself so much and think that he wasn't as good as he actually is. So Lewis has been making some comments stating that he is in the best place that he's ever been in for a long time, and explains why he is more connected to the new car. Inside, Lewis has expressed that versus being him inheriting an old car design in the previous 2025 season, he has essentially helped build this car, and it feels more like he is at one with this car. I also think Lewis is a big fan of this regulations, and we saw him off the start during testing, which again I'll talk about in an entirely separate video. But we saw him get an extremely good start off the line for testing, as he almost outdragged every single one of the people from like P16 or something. So certainly I think there's a lot of positivity around that Ferrari car right now, and I think Lewis has no reason to be unhappy about it right now. So yeah, we also have another quote here from later in the week that he vows that he's not going anywhere, as he voices excitement for the 2026 season after inspiring testing. I think it's safe to say that Ferrari testing went extremely well, and as a Ferrari fan, there's a lot of hopium around the entire team right now. So I'm excited to see that Lewis similarly shares that hope that the car will be good. But Melbourne is a very different circuit from Bahrain, and certainly Bahrain is a circuit that seems to favor the Ferrari over other different cars. So it wouldn't surprise me if they have kind of a meh Melbourne Grand Prix, but I hope that they go well, and I wish them nothing the best. Obviously, they've had success in Melbourne with Carlos in 2024 winning that Grand Prix. But yeah, it's exciting to hear as well that Lewis is not going anywhere post 2026, as it certainly seemed like off the back of next year that there was high probability that this was going to be his last year. But it's very early. It's very early testing, and the season has not really even begun yet technically. So certainly, if that Ferrari is not good, I definitely think there's still time for a lot to go downhill for Lewis, but I wish him nothing the best. And obviously, I want to see Lewis continue to race as much as humanly possible, as he's the best Formula One driver of all time statistically. So yeah, let's move on to our next story. We have the FIA issuing statements after F1 Commission and Power Unit advisory meetings. This comes off the back of some concerns around the F1 Power Unit and Mercedes, I think, manipulation of the compression ratio. And just a lot of concerns around how race starts were going to go and how things were going, though I do think it's gotten a lot better as we go later, as we have gone through testing, and I think testing has been a positive in that department. But yeah, Stefano Domenicali has expressed the information that they gathered throughout this whole testing. And he has said that in common with the introduction of such significant regulatory changes, there are still a collective learnings to be taken from preseason testing. And I think this is true. As a group, the teams, the power unit manufacturers, there was a commitment to work through all technical aspects of the opening race of the 2026 season in Melbourne next month. And there's constructive discussion took place among all the teams following initial feedback from drivers arising from a survey instigated by the FIA. Topics covered include overall car characteristics, energy and power unit, aerodynamics, overtaking, racing, tires, and mechanical grip. Positive feedback from drivers was received on the reduced weight and smaller dimensions of the 2026 cars. Drivers generally agreed that the new car exhibited improved ride quality and stronger initial acceleration. Further evaluation and technical checks on energy management matters will be carried out over the following 3 days of the second pre-season testing in Bahrain. Anyway, I'm not going to read out the entire thing, but all this to say that they ultimately agreed that no immediate major regulatory changes were required, giving the initial feedback. But I could have sworn I read somewhere that they were considering having some changes about halfway through the year. And certainly I think that doesn't look unlikely as of right now. But I think it's very much a case of we will have to wait and see for Bahrain, for the Melbourne Grand Prix, apologies. So ultimately we'll just have to wait and see. And there's no amendments right now, which seems like there's a lot more confidence following the Bahrain testing, and I think they're warranted to have done so because the Bahrain testing, the second test, went extremely well. But again, I'll be covering that later. Stay tuned. But I think I read somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, that the Mercedes ended up having some kind of, or all of the teams that were against Mercedes ended up having kind of a negative consequence for them trying to target Mercedes versus trying to target, them trying to target Mercedes for their compression ratio engine, and there was some kind of negative feedback, but I could be mistaken in that department. So yeah, overall, it's an exciting time for Formula One, and I'm interested to see how these regulations change over the course of the season. So yeah, continuing this real quickly, Stefano Domenicali, who is the current CEO of the Formula One, has expressed that he thinks there's going to be an incredible year, and he explains that the possibility to learn and experience the new regulations, and I'm not surprised that Stefano would say this. I mean, he's trying to push the Formula One as much as he possibly can as the Chief Executive Officer. So I'm not surprised that he's expressing a lot of positivity around the new regulations, and I think it will be an incredible year. So yeah, let's talk about Lauren Mueller and Hannah Schmitz becoming the first woman to have a corner named after them at the Australian Grand Prix. So to mark International Women's Day, they've both been, it's been decided that Turn 6 will be dedicated to them, which I think is fantastic. Formula One has always been a sport that's been very male-dominated, and it's been super exciting to see advances in women in the field there's already lots of different women in the field, as we can see with these two, but this, along with the Formula One Academy, is extremely exciting to see Formula One kind of introduce more women in the field, as it should be. So it's extremely exciting to see Turn 6 dedicated to them at the Australian Grand Prix. I'm not sure what they're going to call it, maybe like the Schmitz-Mueller corner or something like that. But it's Turn 6, it's extremely exciting. Obviously working with Esteban Ocon, Esteban has said that she's awesome to work with and her trajectory has been very impressive. And Hannah Schmitz is an extremely talented race engineer. So it's been amazing to see that women in the STEM space and in Formula One sphere have been getting so much great recognition, as it should be. And having them get their own turn in Turn 6 is amazing. And I'm extremely excited to see what these two do in the future of Formula One, with Hannah already being an extremely renowned engineer, of course. Oh, yeah, I think she's a race engineer. So yeah, let's go to our final story with F2 champion Théo Pourchaire joining Mercedes as a development driver. To be entirely honest, I wasn't even aware that Théo Pourchaire had won the 2023 F2 championship. There was a lot of prospects around Théo Pourchaire joining IndyCar a couple years ago in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. But he's now joined Mercedes as the development driver, which I think is a good move for him. Certainly it's not surprising that he's trying to continue to push into the Formula One space. And yeah, I wish Théo nothing but the best. As I said, he gained experience in IndyCar in 2024, as he was the reserve driver for Alfa Romeo Kick Sauber. And I think there's a lot of hope for Théo Pourchaire, and I wish him nothing but the best. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below on anything that I missed, and I'll cover it in next week's This Week in Formula One. Again, I want to reiterate before I go that next week's This Week in Formula One will be a pre-show for the Australian Grand Prix. So it'll be different than normal, but I will still be covering all the news and relevant things that goes on. I'll also be doing a post-show for the next week's This Week in Formula One, where I'll talk about what happened in the Australian Grand Prix. So yeah, all that being said, stay tuned again later in the week for a Bahrain Explained Week 2 video. Apologies for the delay on that one, and I hope you have a great, wonderful day. Bye for now. Peace. Bye guys.